Hey, and welcome to the second edition of Retro Hour, a series where I go back and play retro games from my past for an hour just to see how they've aged and if they still hold up. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the original Tomb Raider. For those who don't know, last week from when this video goes up, it's actually been 28 years since the release of the original Tomb Raider game. So I figured it would be fun to go back and take a look at the PS1 version of this very classic game. The story of the original Tomb Raider game is actually told through these CGI cutscenes. These were actually pretty interesting back in the day. They really do kind of help to sort of convey the story, although you don't really get that many of them in the game. You can see here that a nuclear explosion in New Mexico has led to this massive crater here, which has, well, it's uncovered this mysterious chamber here. What is it? Who's in the chamber? Well, I guess we're going to find out as we play through the game. But this is kind of the stinger to get people interested in the story. I'm going to let the next cutscene play out because I want you to kind of enjoy just the quirky nature of it all.
What's a man got to do to get that kind of attention from you?
It's hard to say exactly, but you seem to be doing fine.
Well, great. Though truth is, it ain't me that wants you.
Oh?
No, Miss Jacqueline Natla does, from Natla Technologies. You know, creator of all things bright and beautiful.
Seal it, Larson.
Ma'am.
Feast your eyes on this, Lara. How does that make your wallet rumble?
I'm sorry. I only play for sport.
Then you'll like a big park. Peru, vast mountain ranges to cover, sheer walls of ice, rocky crags, savage winds, and there's this little trinket. An age-old artifact of mystical powers buried in the unfound tomb of Qualapec. That's my interest. You could leave tomorrow. Are you busy tomorrow?
I really do like that there's a sense of fun between Lara and other characters, but not just that, she's also kick-ass and she can handle business for herself. Just hearing the original Tomb Raider track is super nostalgic to me. The original Tomb Raider is very special in my opinion. The sequels try to extend things, make things bigger, add a lot more things in, but this original Tomb Raider game is just very, very special to me. And what trip to classic Tomb Raider would be complete without a visit to Lara Croft's home? So for those who don't know, Lara's home is actually a feature of these classic games. It serves as a training base where the player can pretty much practice Lara's moves, get used to the controls, and it's a really, really fun idea.
Welcome to my... Use the D-pad to go into the music room.
It's really cool because Lara's basically talking to the gamer here, directing them through her house and also sort of explaining how to control her. It's a really unique way of handling a tutorial level, and I would argue that for new players this is an essential visit because here is a safe space where you can learn the controls, learn how to do things, and just basically get good at the game.
Okay, let's do some tumbling. Press the jump button.
You best do as she
Now
says.
press it again and quickly press one of the directions and I'll jump that way.
Like I said, it's really cool that this kind of bond between Lara and the gamer is forged early on, but it also kind of lets you look around her home here. We kind of get to see behind the curtain and see what kind of person Lara actually is. And it's a really, really, really interesting way to kind
main
of
hall.
build character.
Sorry about the crates. I'm having some things put into storage and the delivery people haven't been yet.
The way Lara's just having a casual conversation with the gamer, you know, discussing like her frustrations over the boxes not being
Run up
moved.
to a crate and while still pressing forward, press action and I'll vault up onto it.
You can die in Lara's mansion, but it takes a lot of work to do
This
that.
used to... I don't actually run everywhere. When I want to be careful, I walk. With the walk button down, I won't fall. If you want to look around, press and hold the look button, then press in the direction you want to look.
It's kind of important that you pay attention to what Lara is saying here if you want to get far in this game. Just don't look outside. The outside areas are pretty horrifying to glance at in any great detail. What I like as well here is that you are not forced to actually do something here that you don't want to do. If you just want to run straight to the pool and start swimming around, you can do just that.
If I do a run, walk to the edge with the white line until I stop. Then let go of walk and tap backwards to give me a run up. Press forward and almost immediately press and hold the jump button. I won't actually jump until the last minute. Right, this is a really big one. So do a running jump exactly as before, except while I'm in the air, press and hold the... Nice. Try to vault up here. I can't climb up because the gap is too small. But press right and I'll shimmy sideways until there is room. Then press forward. Tap backwards and I'll jump off backwards. Immediately press and hold the action button and I'll grab the ledge on the way down. Let's go for a swim. The jump button and the directions move me around underwater. Air. Just use forward and left and right to manoeuvre around on the surface. Press jump to dive down for another swim about, or go to the edge and press action to climb out. Right, now I'd better take off these wet clothes.
The interesting thing is with Tomb Raider 1, the Lara's home section is pretty much treated as a self-contained area, and once you've completed the pool bit, you get kicked back to the main menu. In Tomb Raider 2 and 3, it's basically left as an open-ended experience that you can run around and explore at your own whim. Now though, I'm going to dive into the main story section of Tomb Raider, and you can see that once again, we've got a FMV here playing. This is just conveying to us how we get to the first level. You can see that we're in a very snowy area. Our guide there is leading us up to this mountainside. Lara here, I don't think she's dressed for the occasion, it has to be mentioned. And that is a theme in these Tomb Raider games. Lara does not really dress for the occasion, appropriately I would argue. But we also get to see Lara's ingenuity here because she bashes this button and the door opens. But unfortunately for the guide down below, he is just a delicious sack of meat for the wolves that are about to jump on him. You chose a bad day to not wear your running shoes, mate. That's all I'm going to say. But I also like this because as an opening, it really just kind of shows that Lara, you know, is willing to sort of get into the action. Even though she did kind of cause the death here, she didn't really check to see if he was okay for the door to open and get ambushed. Lara here also killing endangered wolves. We love to see it. And unfortunately, you did not make it to the first level. And with that, we are inside the first tomb of Tomb Raider 1. And immediately as we load into this level, it's important to note that a lot of storytelling is used in Tomb Raider through the environments. Just look at the paw prints on the floor there. This kind of shows you where those wolves came from, and you can actually follow them through the level. But what I really like about Tomb Raider 1, and I think it's something that gets lost in some of the later Tomb Raider games, is just the sense of wonder and scale. Here we are inside a massive cave. It's just you and Lara and a handful of wild animals who stand between you and whatever it is we're looking for. The original Tomb Raider games have Lara kind of look in the direction of where you're meant to go, but there's also plenty of optional extra areas here. We're going to use the rock there to jump up here. Areas like this you don't actually have to come and visit. They are completely optional, but it is worth picking up as many backpacks and medkits as you can. One of the major critiques that I hear about these classic Tomb Raider games is that the controls are too tanky, etc, etc. And I've always been kind of infuriated by that, because here's the thing. A lot of people who play these Tomb Raider games will not realise that you're supposed to go to Lara's house first, and because it's an optional training level, a lot of people will just jump into this first level, not really understand what controls they're supposed to be doing, because you'll have noticed that the game is not giving us any kind of tutorials. It's not putting prompts on the screen. And you can also see that some of these levels and rooms are very big. They're quite vast. So it's very easy to kind of get lost and meander down pathways that may not lead you anywhere. And for a lot of people, that can be very frustrating. The original Tomb Raider games in particular do not hold the gamer's hand, and they are quite brutal about that. There's no yellow markers here, there's no highlighted, ledges to show you where you're meant to go and such. As you can see here, we can look into the future part of the level. There's a lot to explore, and I totally understand why some people may not have liked this kind of gameplay, because there's a lot to learn, and this game expects you to learn the basics if you're going to actually get anywhere in it. But for me personally, I don't have a problem with the way that Lara controls. I've always found it pretty fun to play on PC or PS1. Speaking of storytelling, you can actually see the paw prints that we've been following through the level actually end up here. So we're actually going to murder and massacre the relatives of the wolves that, took our guide out. So that was for our guide. You guys earned that. The original Tomb Raider game also does a decent job of trying to fill its world with interesting things to look at, like that little statue there. You can also see that there's a lot of space down here. Not much of this space actually has anything interesting to kind of explore, but it's here for curious gamers to stick their head into and just have a look around. We'll head across this bridge here. This is basically teaching you how to control Lara on top of ledges, and sort of making sure that you understand that you can't just sort of run all the time. You actually have to be very careful in where you're going, because you may end up dropping down. Again, this is a very safe area for the player to run through once you kill those wolves. And in a second, we're going to be tested on the jumping mechanics in this game to make sure the player actually knows how to jump. First things first though, we're going to drop down here and we're going to shoot this bear. The Tomb Raider games have a bit of a reputation for having a very high animal body count, and me shooting this bear does not do anything to sort of diminish that. The bears in this game are not that bad to deal with. The only problem is if they sort of pin you against a wall, or if they sort of attack you from around a corner. They can do a lot of damage quickly in that. With Tomb Raider 1, there really aren't that many human enemies to deal with. Really, it's Tomb Raider 2 and onwards where you see a lot more humans running around these levels. In Tomb Raider 1, it's really just Lara, a bunch of wildlife animals, and the odd human here or there. But ultimately, they don't really serve as the major enemies in this game. Until you get to the Atlanta part of this game, but we're definitely not going to be getting there in this video. So when it comes to talking about Tomb Raider 1 and its console ports, there are actually some differences across the board. If you played this on PC, you can actually save whenever you want. You can just open up the menu to do that. But in a second, we're actually going to be introduced to the PS1 way of saving, the infamous save crystals. Save crystals cannot be stored, they cannot be moved. You can only save on the PS1 version here using these save crystals, and once you use them once, they are gone forever. So if you save at a bad time with no health, you're pretty much out of luck on that one. And it is one of the more frustrating aspects of this original Tomb Raider on PS1, I would argue. However, I do know that some people are really fond of the save crystals, so really it comes down to personal taste. In my opinion though, the PlayStation 1 version before the remasters were re-released in 2024, I do believe the PS1 version is the best way to experience Tomb Raider 1. Things like this, for example, like the way that the music works in the PlayStation 1 version is just great. Obviously, we've killed those wolves very quickly, but I just kind of like how the music is handled in this version. I just feel that on PlayStation 1 with the controller, it just works so well. There's the secret jingle. There is a massive medkit in here for me to grab. The original Tomb Raider actually sold incredibly well on PlayStation 1. When this arrived, it was such a cultural moment. It sort of came at the right time. PlayStation was just sort of blowing up, and Lara was just a different kind of protagonist, and everything just kind of happened in a great way for Lara Croft to kind of become the face of PlayStation for a little while there. And this is the experience that most of those people would have had. This is probably the first time in Tomb Raider 1 where the player is actually challenged on a number of the skills that they've been taught so far. As you can see here, you're kind of required to get up top to hit that switch and open the door behind us. In order to do that though, you've got to make use of the mechanics that you've been taught at Lara's home. And again, this is one of the reasons why if you skip Lara's home and you try to race through this first level, a lot of people ran into the problem of just not knowing what to do, which is kind of understandable because, as I've mentioned already, this game doesn't really do tutorials and it doesn't really have on-screen prompts to sort of tell you what you're meant to do. You're supposed to work it out. I do love the ambient music in the PlayStation 1 version here. I think there's a wolf around this corner here. There is. If you've ever played Anniversary as well, you will probably remember this area, although they do massively reinterpret the puzzle here and change it to fit that game's mechanics. For me personally, I like Anniversary. I wouldn't say it's one of my favourite Tomb Raider games though. There's just a quirkiness, there's just something special about these early Tomb Raider games that, in my opinion, couldn't be recaptured in Anniversary, no matter how much polish they tried to put on top of it. So we now have to run towards the end of a level here. And drop down. Once we go through this door, we're actually basically at the end here. So that is the first level done. As you can see, nothing too difficult for us to worry about. As a first level, I think Caves is fine for what it is. It just sort of reinforces what you learned in Lara's home, and the game doesn't really throw that many challenges at the player in Caves. It's just sort of a linear pathway for the player to sort of understand what they're going to be doing and get used to the combat mechanics, because that's the one thing that wasn't really taught in Lara's home. And immediately at the start of this level, you're kind of forced to make use of those combat controls. Now you may recognise this from the demo loop of the game. If you leave the game running at the title screen, eventually you'll end up in a demo loop on this level. One often overlooked fact about the original Tomb Raider is that despite Lara going on to become one of Sony PlayStation's biggest mascots, she actually made her debut on the Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn version of Tomb Raider 1 actually released around a month before the PlayStation 1 version touched down. I was waiting for that bird to show up. I wondered why it didn't spawn in. When you go around that door there, normally this bird spawns in, and he normally gets you on that corner. It's supposed to sort of provide a big jump scare. I also kind of like how the roof in here is really low, so you kind of can't just jump around and flip around like you normally would. The game's basically forcing you to face the bear head on there. Is there anything in here that's actually interesting? I don't think so. But going back to what I was saying, Sega Saturn actually got Tomb Raider 1 first, and It's interesting because the performance of that version of Tomb Raider is not particularly great. I did debate playing that version here, but I've never actually experienced it myself, and to be honest, from all accounts, there's nothing truly special going on in the Sega Saturn version that you aren't finding in the PlayStation 1 version here. The thing with this level here is that there's a lot of items around like that to sort of build the world out, to kind of make it feel more lived in. Because remember, this is supposed to be a village, so there's a lot of sort of houses and doorways, but there's also a lot of spaces like this in here, where when you kind of look in, you can see that there's a trap being set for us here. If we want that large medkit over there, we're going to have to move quickly. I always found this wall very intimidating with the skulls on it there. You also get to learn here about the shoving and pushing mechanics. Basically, Tomb Raider 1 really loves its block puzzles. And for a lot of this game, you'll be moving around blocks like this to get into new rooms and also to help you complete puzzles. This one's fairly basic for what it is, but we actually need to push this all the way through, because we're actually going to be using this to climb up to the next level. It's a good thing that Lara's feeling strong today. In Angel of Darkness, she's definitely not feeling this strong, let me tell you. So one aspect of Tomb Raider that I think people rightly get a bit miffed about is this kind of thing here. So you come into this room and you can see here there's actually this item here. Now the thing is, when we leave here, I'm going to do this the way most people would. So you just sort of run around the corner here. Did you miss it? If you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't have noticed that there's actually a key here as well. And one of the things with Tomb Raider is that you have to explore every nook and cranny on your first playthrough, unless you're using a walkthrough. The game doesn't really have a problem in putting keys in very hard to see places, and it only gets a bit worse later on when it starts putting keys underwater, and you really have to start looking and paying attention to what's going on underwater with all the flickering lights and such. I imagine this was supposed to be a house, by the way. I can only imagine this is a house. You can see there's a large medkit in the shadows here. But basically, if you missed either one of those keys down there, let's say you picked up one of the keys and then you kind of ran off through the level. One of those keys you don't actually need until right before the end of a level. And what that basically means is you could very well get to the end of a level, not have the required key, and then you could potentially spend hours looking up and down all around this level, trying to find that key, not realizing that you've just completely missed it. And what makes me laugh is that a lot of these levels have areas like this which feel important because this is the first time that you're swimming, so you would expect there to be something essential down here, but this area is entirely optional. So Tomb Raider 1 really does go out of its way to create that sense that you're exploring tombs, that there's dead ends, there's things that are just supposed to lead you in directions that may not be the way you need to actually go. I thought there might be an enemy in here. Speaking of, the underwater sections in Tomb Raider 1, I feel are particularly well handled. I think that underwater sections are not particularly loved by gamers at large. I can only think of one or two underwater segments in games that I would say I like. I think in Tomb Raider 1, they do a really decent job of not making these sections too annoying. They also look pretty nice with the blue tint and the sound effects of Lara being underwater. You can see as well that there's a lever there. That opens up a secret on the other side of this watered area. And again, it's one of those things where if you're not paying attention, a lot of these secrets may go completely over your head and you have no idea they're there until you sort of see someone else do it in a video or talking about it later on. That's one of the things with these Tomb Raider games. You really have to have your eyes open going into every room. Although I would love to know how this ancient tribe was able to get medkits. And I think this is Uzi clips. Oh no, those are Magnum clips. How they were able to get Magnum clips in here. Do explain. I think the worst aspect of Tomb Raider's underwater bits are when it starts throwing enemies into the mix. In Tomb Raider 1, it's not a super annoyance. There are some alligators in some of the later levels. The thing with most of those, though, is that you can pretty much get away from them, and usually there's a spot to shoot them from above the ground. I think it's in Tomb Raider 2 and 3 where they introduce the harpoon gun and try to get you to do underwater combat. That's kind of where the underwater sections start becoming unbearable in Tomb Raider. But you can see here there's a lot of directions that the player can head in. There's also a lot of hazards like these bats. The bats don't really do that much damage. If you're paying attention, you can easily get rid of those things. There's also down in this direction here. So if we just wanted to spend time wandering around, seeing what's in this level, you can see that this really does try to create a feeling that you're in a lived-in space, and there's also a chance for you to encounter hazards around every corner. Now, speaking about the combat in Tomb Raider 1, I think it's very fair to say that the combat is by far the weakest aspect of this game. It's not terrible, but I do think that the way Lara kind of moves and the way that Lara interacts with the world, the way that her guns work and the way that they lock onto enemies makes it kind of difficult to really engage with enemies in a way that doesn't involve you just using med packs to heal yourself up until you know the enemy falls before you. And unfortunately, it's a problem that kind of persists in these classic Tomb Raider games. Whenever the action picks up in terms of combat, it's usually the weakest aspect of the games. Even the sequels really do struggle with that. We're pretty much done with the opening half of this level. When we head inside this door here, we'll actually be entering the area that I used to play a lot as a kid. So through this door is the second half of this level, and this was actually given out as the PC demo back in the day. So this section here is one area of this game that I know incredibly well, largely because for about 6 months this is the only bit of Tomb Raider that we got to play. The gimmick here is that you need to get into the center door there, and in order to do that you actually have to complete these little side sections. I am going to make use of the medkit there. So as we make our way around the corner here, there's actually a jumping puzzle. You can see that this first one is not too difficult. It's basically teaching you about jumping around these rooms and making sure that you know how to ascend like vertical rooms like this. I think this is one of the major strengths of Tomb Raider 1, in that the levels are designed to train the player and to get them ready for the hazards later on in the game, but they do it in a way where the gamer is not being sort of overwhelmed with on-screen prompts and such. It's a very subtle way of pushing the gamer into learning the mechanics of the game and mastering them, so that later on a lot of the hazards are not so unfair. I also think that the next part of this is pretty cool, because when we hit this switch here, we're going to be able to access the second area. Now you have a choice in how you get back down here. You can go back down the way we came, or you can drop down off this ledge here. Now the thing is, if you drop down off this ledge, you can see it's a massive drop, and there's actually a chance that you can fall down and kill Lara here. So what you have to do instead, you have to very carefully make your way down in a way that doesn't endanger Lara, but it also kind of protects her from fall damage. And again, this is one of the reasons I really like the level design in Tomb Raider 1. These early levels do a great job of introducing new mechanics and new things that the player needs to be aware of. So being able to sort of scale down there and take a massive shortcut in getting back down is really great for the player, because they'll now remember that if you drop from a high area onto a hard floor, lava's going to go kaput. I also kind of like how this room here is an escalation of all the abilities that we've learned. There's falling floors, there's multiple directions for the player to go in, there's also ways for the player to quickly make it through this room if they know what they're doing, as you can see here. They really do like their bats in these early levels. We'll head in here. Just make sure there's no medkits, and then we'll hit this switch. Again, as we head outside here, you once again have to be really, really careful in how you kind of drop down here. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've put a save crystal here, is because the way that they kind of escalate things when you kind of go off the edge here is that a lot of the area down here is actually exposed. So whereas on the other side there was a lot more area for the player to sort of fall down accidentally onto, here there's a lot more area for the player to just drop down and kill Lara instantly. And what you have to remember is, if Lara dies and you haven't saved, that's it. You basically get booted back to the start of the level. And as you'll see here, the game's about to introduce us to Indiana Jones style hazards. When we hit this switch here, there's actually a fun little trap, so we end up dropping down into this water, and there's actually several ways we can go here, but the main one the game wants us to take is up here. There's actually a bear that's running around this centre part here, and you can see that this thing is already on us. One of the reasons that that part is important is because it teaches players to be aware of their surroundings, to sort of pop out of the water, to look around and make sure that where they're getting up from is actually safe for the player to do so. I do think the bear's a little bit too aggressive, because even if you're really careful there, it'll probably attack you as you come out of the water, so you will need a med kit or two. Luckily we were able to stop the swinging blades there. The reason that they've done that is because, going back to what we were talking about earlier, if you didn't pick up that second key that we saw earlier on, you're actually going to need to go back into the level to actually get the key. And if they didn't give you a way of, you know, stopping those blades, then it would have been a lot more difficult for the player to actually make their way back into the main part of the level. As mentioned, there's a lot of hidden spots in these two games, and if you're paying attention, it's not that difficult to see where they are, provided you're sort of paying attention. I don't think I'm going to be able to jump over there. It would save me a bit of time. But I have a feeling that roof is, yep, that roof was too small. Luckily, the direction we need to go in is actually through that hole there. It's kind of well hidden. Again, the game's expecting you to do a bit of exploring to figure out the way forward here. I can imagine a lot of people didn't find these locations, probably because they were expecting the game to just sort of point them in the right direction. You can see the second switch is here. This is the one that we actually need to hit to open up that gate there. This will allow us to exit the level. But spare thought for all those players in the 90s who did not find this key way back in the level and then had to go back and spend hours looking through this level for the gold idol here just so they could exit. You'll also have noticed that all of these levels are leading into each other. So how Tomb Raider 1 handles its levels is there are sections in the game that take place at different locations, and usually there's 4 different levels in each of the sections. Usually they lead into each other in one way or another. So you can see we're still in the caves from the end of that level. The third level here is actually pretty interesting. It really goes big on the scale, and the premise of this level is that there's a machine at the top of this river that will block the river and allow us to get into the next level. But in order to do that, we've actually got to find cogs, and the cogs are kind of hidden all around this level. Ugh. So, as I mentioned in the previous level, one of the big icks I have with Tomb Raider 1 is the way that enemies can sort of knock you back. And especially when you're getting out of water, they are able to get some cheap shots on you, even if you're really, really careful. You can see the waterfall that we just dove off of there. And you will have seen as well, the game has not given us any objectives to kind of work through here. You can use the compass in your backpack, and that will kind of try to point you in the sort of direction you need to be heading in. But really, if you're kind of expecting this game to sort of give you objectives to work through, unfortunately, Tomb Raider 1 in particular does not really like explaining itself to the gamer. You can see there that was a dead end. As we make our way up this cliff face here, we're about to encounter one of the more iconic moments from the original Tomb Raider game, and even people who haven't played Tomb Raider, I suspect, may have seen what we're about to encounter on the other side of this. So I'm just going to make sure we have full health for this, because this is going to get very, very, very messy. As we make our way out into this open space here, and you can see how ambitious this game is in the size of this arena here, you can also see dinosaurs. Yes, Lara Croft is facing off against dinosaurs. You can see that the frame rate here is taking a very small hit. That is purely down to the fact that this is a large 3D area, very big space. But of course, we know that it's not just filled with small dinosaurs, it's actually filled with a T-Rex as well. The number of people who probably made it this far in Tomb Raider and then saw that they had to fight a T-Rex here. It isn't actually that difficult to beat if you sort of stall it and you are able to control the flow of that battle. It can do incredible damage though, so you do want to make sure you get rid of it before it's able to take a chunk out of Lara. Well, yes, one of the more iconic enemies in this game by far. In Tomb Raider 2 they recreate that on the first level in a secret encounter, and there is a T-Rex in Tomb Raider 3 if I'm not mistaken. I think it's on the island levels. If you play this on the remastered versions of Tomb Raider 1, 2, 3, you'll be able to see the outdoor sky area in the skybox. One of the bigger debates around the remaster that I saw when it came out was people saying Tomb Raider 1 shouldn't have outdoor areas, because this is actually meant to be an outdoor area. If you put on the new graphics in the remaster, you actually get to see the sky and all that stuff. In Tomb Raider 1, they didn't implement proper outdoor scenery, so a lot of this game actually takes place indoors, and you only ever really see the outdoor section in Lara's home and in the FMVs. Personally speaking, I really like how they handled the remaster. Here's the first cog, by the way. Again, with these cogs, you've got to keep your eyes out, because they are hidden pretty well in the level, and unless you're really, really you know, paying attention, it's very easy to miss them. And this is such a massive area. There's so many small caves that come off it. You can spend yet more hours just exploring here. You can tell that these early Tomb Raider games were very much on the you go and explore in this level, see what you can do, and let's see if you can actually find your way forward. You can also now see that we are heading out onto the bridge of the canyon that we were just in. This is a place where the player could potentially do a lot of damage to themselves if they're not careful. And if you haven't killed the T-Rex and you make it up here, I can imagine it's even more terrifying watching him run around down there. But yes, going back to what I was saying just a bit earlier, I do think that the remasters do a great job of updating this experience. I feel that the remastered textures are on point. I feel that the remastered package overall does a very, very good job of capturing the spirit of these earlier Tomb Raider games without changing them too much. It's very respectful as a remaster, and if you were going to come back to experience these, I would recommend that as the way forward. There's really very little reason to hunt down the PS1 version at this point, unless you really, really want to experience these save crystals in their sort of original form. And yes, I am aware that the save crystals do exist in the remastered version in the New Game Plus, but what I'm basically saying is you can play with the crystals here from the start of Tomb Raider 1. Okay, where's this dinosaur? Oh, there he is. It decided to rush me. It decided to rush me there. It's lucky that I remember where all these cogs are, because I do remember in my past I have spent a good long time looking around this area trying to figure out where these cogs actually are. Grab the final cog here. Oof, okay. I nearly overshot it there. That would have been a disaster. I guess one thing we can talk about that I haven't really sort of broached is the new Tomb Raider games. So, if you've ever dipped your toes into the Tomb Raider community, you will quickly find that there is something of a split between the new Tomb Raider games, aka the Crystal Dynamic 2013 series, and the classic games. And one of the reasons for that is because Crystal Dynamics has not done the best job until recently of sort of keeping these classic games alive. For the longest time, the only way you could really experience these was either by finding the ROMs for the console versions like this one, or by playing the PC versions off GOG, which were not super well optimized, and they didn't have... Oof, I was supposed to get up there. Oh, okay, I can just use that wall there. And for a long time, being a fan of these classic Tomb Raider games was just frustrating. It was so frustrating because the PC versions don't really support controller mods. You couldn't play the expansions. You know, there was just a lot of problems with the classic Tomb Raider games, and for the longest time I was convinced they were never going to do anything with these. They were never going to bring them back to the modern times because they were too antiquated. They, weren't the focus for the Tomb Raider series. Oof, that nearly went bad. But luckily, with the remastered trilogy and with the upcoming 4, 5, 6 trilogy that they've just recently announced, it seems like people are finally starting to catch on that these games are actually really, really good. They hold up really well, and provided you come in understanding what it is you're grappling with, I really think that these games hold up really, really well. Also, what I love here is that some of the roofs of these caves come down really low. So if you're not paying attention, like I wasn't there, you can actually misjudge jumps, or you can just, bang into the roof and get knocked into the river. You can see that there's actually a current in that river, pushing us down the waterfall. I think one of the big issues is that a lot of the fans of classic Tomb Raider, like myself and others, felt really ignored for a long time by Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix. There seemed to be this real concerted effort to push Tomb Raider as a series in a different direction, and I think a lot of that comes from the wider critiques of Lara Croft. So I've avoided talking about like Lara's massive bazookas in this video so far, but in wider pop culture, one of the reasons Lara became popular is because she was kind of turned into a celebrity of sorts after Tomb Raider 1 released, and that also kind of created a negative connotation that I think the series was really trying to shrug in previous years. You can see there I almost bounced off the roof and fell into the water. A lot of these jumps in these Tomb Raider games are very careful and considered. You've got to choose the right jump for the right moment. If you try to do a running jump there, for example, you'll just bounce off that wall and fall into the river. But going back to discussing the series overall, I just feel that Crystal Dynamics wanted to move away from these classic games and some of the more sort of troubling aspects around the imagery of Lara and some of the things that she ended up doing in the 1990s, because they wanted to sort of take the series in a different direction, which is totally fine. But I think that one of the reasons a lot of fans of classic Tomb Raider were upset for the longest time, and one of the reasons why Tomb Raider Remastered did better than expected, is because for years Crystal Dynamics didn't really respect these games. It kind of felt like they were content for these games to just be overlooked and forgotten and left in the past. I say that because they were re-releasing this game, but they were not doing any enhancements to it. They were not making it easier for modern gamers to play this. By the way, we have just completed this puzzle here. Basically, we now have blocked the river down below, which means that we've exposed the secret passage behind the waterfall, and that means we can pretty much end this level. There is a secret actually in that back corner over there where the small waterfalls are, but I don't think we're actually going to be able to get over there without jumping, and I really don't want to climb all the way back up just to get what I think is just going to be a med kit. There is a shotgun around the corner here. The shotgun's actually really useful in Tomb Raider. It's quite overpowered and really, really useful against the bosses. I also like how Lara puts it on her back, so you can actually see that she's holding a shotgun. Really, really cool touch there. Ultimately for me, I'm just glad that we did get such a high quality remaster that respects the old games while at the same time bringing in modern conveniences. I did buy the handheld Tomb Raider 1 and 2 ports over on Android a few years ago, which were officially released. They were not great, let me tell you. They were rough, and unfortunately for classic Tomb Raider fans, that's kind of been the mentality over the last few years when it's come to these classic games. Experiencing them in any decent form required a PC. Not being able to play classic Tomb Raider games on consoles or have like easy controller input has always been a blight. And if I was going to recommend any way to experience these, I would always push people to play the remastered versions now. There's no reason at all you need to come back and play this PS1 version here. I'm doing this purely for nostalgia purposes, and I'm really having a good time here. You can see that the river has dried out. We can't dive into the bottom of here anymore just because we've, accidentally... Oh, wait, we can. There's still water down here. Interesting. You can see, though, that the waterfall has stopped flowing and it's exposed this entryway here. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I think I'll be able to get this level done in 10 minutes. It would be nice to be able to get the first set of 4 levels done. As said, I'm having a blast playing through this. Like, this is bringing back so many good memories, and honestly, it's giving me the itch to play the whole game again. It's just that much fun. I'll make use of the shotgun in this level. If we do end up getting to the boss battle, the shotgun actually takes a lot of the time out of that. So hopefully this will help us to actually finish this level in speedy time. Tomb Raider is definitely a child influenced by Indiana Jones. It really loves putting those Indiana Jones sort of moments in the game as a way for players to kind of, you know, relive those experiences from the classic movies. I love how you can sort of see the item that you need there, but unfortunately it's just out of reach. The door has dropped, and we actually need to complete 3 puzzles now in order to get to it. Yep, here come some dinosaurs. Luckily the shotgun just takes them out in one shot, which I'm definitely not going to complain about. When we come into this room here, you can see the symbols up here. This indicates there are 3 different areas. The save crystals really do kind of change how you approach these areas, because as you can see here, we're only going to get to use this once. So me using it at the start here is a bit of a gamble, because if we die in any of these rooms, we are going to have to repeat all of this. You can see there are some spikes in the corner there. We've got these weird platforms with the symbols on them. We're going to hit the switch here and see what happens. You can see that hitting the switch moves the blocks around. The floor is kind of tiled like a chessboard, so you can see where the blocks are going to move. But we actually don't want to hit that switch right now. We just want to head up top here. As said, one of the things about classic Tomb Raider is that you're pushed into a room like this with lots of different sort of angles to look at, but ultimately it's up to you to decipher what the puzzle is trying to get you to do. And I think that's one of the reasons classic Tomb Raider has such a reputation for being a bit harsh. Because in modern games, I have no doubt that there'd sort of be something glowing, or there'd be a yellow trail sort of telling the player which way to go. Not that I'm saying it would ruin the experience at all if they did that here. It's just that it's very clear they want you to do all the heavy thinking in this game. You can see we've now made our way back around to this room. I'm pretty sure we need to hit this switch here now. So if we jump over here, you can see the idea here is that we're meant to be heading over to that switch over there. Although I don't think I've done this right, because I'm pretty sure that's meant to be over there. Oh, you can see there. Okay, on there you can see there's an opening. I'm supposed to jump up there, but the only way I'm going to be able to jump up there is if I move this back to where it was. And obviously we can't jump up there. See what I mean? Even me, who's played this a number of times, can get sort of hung up by missing something and hitting the wrong switch. I was going to do a running jump there, but I have a feeling I'll just smack off the wall there. So I'm actually going to just do a small jump and run around. There we go. See, that moves that across, and it all starts to fall into place now. That would definitely have been a twisted ankle, the way Lara fell off that ledge there, if it was me in real life. So if I do a running jump here, we should make it. Again, it's just about taking your time, not rushing. If you try to rush in these 2-meter games, especially with these precise platforming moments, you're going to end up in the spikes. Also need to make sure I don't accidentally tag that wall as we're jumping over there, because obviously the spikes are right beneath us there. The first of the 3 gates we need to open has been opened. I think I'm going to just finish this level in time. As long as we don't kind of run into any major issues, I should be... Oh, okay. I didn't know there was going to be another dinosaur here. Let's head into the middle one here. So one thing Tomb Raider loves doing is faking out the players. You can see that there's a switch there, but there's actually a fake floor beneath it. And if you drop down, you're going to get attacked by these wolves. Oh my gosh, okay. Please don't kill me, that would be pretty awful. That is a nasty trap, just because the player's probably not expecting to get ambushed like that, because they'll be looking the other way. So not only will they be looking the wrong way, they won't have their weapons drawn. Here is another pulling segment. So instead of pushing this time, we actually have to maneuver around and make sure that we move this block out of the way. When you're doing puzzles like this in the classic Tomb Raider games, there is an element of trial and error here, because unfortunately you don't know if you need to push it, if you need to pull it. You can see that if we pushed it, we would have just blocked it off even more. It needs to be careful there. I think there's some spikes down there. Let's just have a look. Okay, there's no spikes there. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I'm pretty sure on this level there's a pit like that that's pretty nasty, because I'm sure I've fallen into it more than once. The good thing Lara didn't skip leg day, because, like, imagine having to jump like this constantly in your daily work. So we've raised up the second gate here. Now, has another dinosaur spawned here? Let's just quickly check. Lara's mission in life is to explore the relics of the past, but what she didn't put in her mission brief was to exterminate them if they start biting her, as she's done with the dinosaurs here. In this last section, we just need to push through here. I'm pretty sure this isn't going to take that long. These are more like little puzzle areas. They're not as big as what you'd find in the later Tomb Raider games. If you've ever played Tomb Raider 2, you'll know what I mean when I say some of the levels in Tomb Raider 2 are huge, and they do take a lot more time. Okay, so we can't push that forward anymore, but there is another block over here. So just take a look at the floor there. You can see that it's the same wobbly tiles that we've seen before. Are the spikes down here? There we are. That's the spike trap that I remember. This is a particularly nasty one, because if the player tries to run and accidentally falls down there, they're going to get impaled and kicked back to the last save point, which is a pretty nasty set of circumstances, one has to say. But with all three of the doors unlocked, we are just going to come in under an hour here in getting the item that we were sent here to retrieve. What I'm going to do, because we're so close to the end here, I'm just going to finish this level out. It's only going to be another minute or two. I like how we see the wall darts again. But of course, as Lara goes to grab it, she brings yet more chaos with her as the temple around her begins to crumble. So as we're making our way down here, I'm going to re-equip my shotgun. You have to be careful because there are some scripted bits like that which will try to kill you if you give it a chance. But as you can see, we're actually heading back into the previous level. And you can see that the lovely chap from the opening FMV is already here shooting at us. This is the first human encounter we've had in this game. But I'm just going to shoot you repeatedly. And that's pretty much the end of this experience. I'm just going to let this FMV play out here because this is probably one of the more iconic FMVs from the original Tomb Raider game.
Well, you have my total attention now. I'm not quite sure if I've got yours, though. Hello?
I'll heel and hide you to a barn door yet.
Of course.
You and that driveling piece of the ski-on. You want to keep it so bad, I'll harness it right up your...
Wait. We're talking about the artifact here?
Damn straight we are, right up.
Hold on. I'm sorry. This piece, you say. Where's the rest?
Miss Natla put Pierre DuPont on that trail.
And where is that?
Ha! You ain't fast enough for him.
So you think all this talking is just holding me up?
I don't know where his little jackrabbit frog legs are running him to. You'll have to ask Miss Natla.
Thank you. I will.
But honestly, this has been a real blast to play through. Getting these 4 levels done in just over an hour and doing Lara's Home as well. Really, really enjoyed this. Really, really fun to go back and just play what is one of my favourite games of all time. Absolute pleasure. I know some people don't like the old Tomb Raider games. I know that some people cannot stomach the controls, the graphics. There's things that people don't like about this, and I totally get it. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But for me personally, I could lose whole days just playing these classic Tomb Raider games. But let me know in the comments what your thoughts on the original Tomb Raider are. Did you ever play it? Which console did you play it on? And are you a fan of these classic Tomb Raider games? Thank you so much for watching.